Welcome to the World According to Boyer. I am your host, Jonathan Boyer. In today's interview, we talk with Mellody Hobson, co-CEO of Ariel Investments. Ever since Mellody gave a TED Talk in 2014 that now has over 3.8 million views, I have followed her career with interest. She has had a fascinating journey that I wanted to share with you. She was one of 6 children raised by a single mother in Chicago. As a child, her phone was shut off, her car was repossessed, and she was evicted from her home. Despite this, Mellody was able to get into Princeton, secured a job at Ariel Investments, where she's now not only co-CEO, but also the firm's largest shareholders. As if this was not enough, she's also on the board of JP Morgan Chase and vice chair of Starbucks. Mellody is also married to Star Wars creator George Lucas. Mellody, welcome to the show.
I'm delighted to join you.
Well, first, I'm really excited to have you on the show. Your day job is being co-CEO of Ariel Investments. Can you briefly describe Ariel to everyone?
Sure. Well, we're a Chicago-based investment management firm. We specialize in equities only. We're a long-only equity manager. Yes, we still exist, and we focus on value investing, so companies that are undervalued but show a strong potential for growth. And we have 2 just real sweet spots. We focus on U.S. stocks that are in the small and mid-size asset classes. And then we have a team in New York that focuses on global investing, so global and international stocks around the world, all cap sizes when we do our international and global investing, so across all the cap ranges. And we've been doing this since 1983. And one of the areas of distinction for us, our longest running portfolio, our small cap value strategy, has had the same portfolio manager since inception, which is almost 37 years. That's unheard of these days in the investment world. And he's done that and added tremendous value to our clients, outperforming the benchmark by over a couple hundred basis points per annum since inception.
In previous interviews, you've stated the diversity of your firm is really the secret sauce. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I think that it's a competitive advantage. And it's one of the things that's unfortunately lacking in the investment management industry. Because we have a very, very diverse group of people, I think we were able to look at investment decisions and really ponder questions from all sorts of angles that leads to a better outcome and ultimately has driven the results that we have. I often quote Scott Page, who wrote the book, The Difference. He's a professor at the University of Michigan, and he came up with the first mathematical formula for diversity. And in this book, he talks about the fact that if you're trying to solve a really hard problem, you want diverse perspectives, even diverse intellects. And the example that he gives that I think is so great is he talks about the smallpox epidemic. And when it was ravaging Europe, all of the greatest scientific minds were stumped. And the person who ultimately led them to the breakthrough solution was a dairy farmer who noticed the milkmaids were not getting smallpox. And to this day, the smallpox vaccination is bovine-based because of the observations of that dairy farmer. And we really believe in that idea at Ariel. So when we think about diversity being a competitive advantage, we think about when we're trying to sit around a table and solve the really hard problems that are natural to value investing. Some say value investors catch a falling knife. How do we make sure we catch the right side? It's all of these diverse perspectives and opinions that allow us to poke holes at an argument and ultimately we think come to a better solution. In fact, we would say if we all agree, there's a problem.
You have a research-driven firm. You obviously spend a great amount of time analyzing each investment opportunity. Where in the process do you start to think about the diversity of the company you are thinking of investing in?
Early in the process, because we want to be invested in 21st century companies. And a 21st century company, in our mind, is diverse at the top of the organization, throughout the organization, and certainly board executives and the like. And that is the only way we believe that you can ultimately understand all the potential customers you may have, be it a business-to-consumer company or a business-to-business company. We think all of those opinions shed light on the ultimate way that you sell the product or service. And so at the end of the day, when we think about owning 21st century companies, we think about diversity. And if they don't have it, we're certainly going to agitate in that regard, often because we own large positions, especially of our U.S. stocks, and so that we can really impress upon them the importance of having all of those voices around a table.
Having a variety of viewpoints is critical. I certainly agree. What type of input do you have on the investments Ariel makes?
So what I would say is I'm not a person who is second-guessing any decisions, and I'm there cheering them on in terms of what they do and how they do it, because I recognize just right off the top, stock picking is very, very hard, and outperforming is even harder. And we've been able to do that over time. And so it's not about second-guessing someone's decision. What I do contribute is my Rolodex. And so the team often comes to me with specific requests or general requests in ways that I can help through the relationships that I have shed light on a stock or an idea. I'm actually doing that today for John with someone specifically. So it might be this person this person sits on a board with you, this person is a good friend. Can we do a call with them to vet this idea? And we do that a lot. And so I'm brought into the conversation as a way of enhancing our decision making through relationships that I have. And we're not trying to get any non-public information or anything like that. We're looking for insights that will allow us to make better decisions.
I'm really interested in your insights on the media landscape. You were chair of DreamWorks. You certainly know the space well. How do you see it changing?
Well, I think the world has changed in a major, major way. We've obviously seen media consolidation in our lifetime that is probably the most significant happenings in the world of media since the invention of the camera. I think that when you look at the fact that it's very hard to be a standalone, let's talk about film companies. DreamWorks was bought by Comcast. You had Pixar that was bought by Disney. You had Lucasfilm that was bought by Disney. Even though those businesses and the content that they produced were outstanding, it became harder and harder for those businesses to compete as standalone companies against the media giants. And so we've seen those giants consolidate and actually expand their content in such a way that has made them even more formidable, in a way that I think actually serves the consumer very well in terms of what they continue to produce. The other thing we've seen is these streaming wars, and I think this is a real thing. I see it from the perspective of Quibi, and I think our customers and just individuals in general have decided they want to get information when they want it, where they want it, how they want it, and the media companies have absolutely adjusted to that. And so we've seen that take place in a way that I think has fundamentally changed how we take in content. But at the end of the day, I still believe the old idea that content is king. And if you have great content, people will watch it, they will find it, they will consume it. The one problem I think we have now is that because there's so much content and all of it is not good, I think that at some point there will be organizations, and my husband is the one who's really convinced me of this, that will curate that for you so that you can find your way through all of it that exists. And so much does it exist today. So I think the future does have some form of curation attached to it. I think the future of streaming is real and permanent. And I think we will see it in various iterations like Quibi that is doing short form content, or obviously you have others who are coming in new ways, Disney targeting children with Disney Plus, or clearly Netflix in terms of how they disrupted the whole industry with streaming to start with.
The curation angle is really, really interesting. How do you see that evolving? Is it artificial intelligence? How does this go? And who's the winner overall 10, 15 years from now?
Well, first of all, I don't know that there is a company yet doing this. And the question is, will the existing services create some form of curation? I think the issue with that is that stays as a closed system. And ultimately, the question is, will there be a curator that will look across all these platforms and help you navigate them? So I'm not sure exactly what form it will take. One would imagine that some form of machine learning or artificial intelligence will be involved. And we see that already. Obviously, Amazon does that very well. You buy a book and it says, if you like this, you probably will like this. We've seen it with Apple with music. So that's not hard to imagine. I just think that the question is who, what, when, where. We don't know any of that yet. I don't think that's taken any form at all. The one other thing I'll say about media that I think is important is I do think that there will still be, and again, my husband has really convinced me of this, we will still go to the movies. We will go to theaters because it's a social event. Certainly, at all levels of incomes now, people have flat screens. They have big flat screens, but there's something social about going out. We can listen to a DVD in almost perfect form of a song, but nothing competes with a live concert. And so this idea of media only being in your home, certainly we have a lot of opportunity to watch in the way that we want it in our home or on the phone or on an iPad or what have you. But there will still be a world of going to the movies. And the question will be, can you uplift the movie experience like we've seen in some of the stadium seating and the movie theaters that now have food at your table, all of those things. I think we'll see more of that. Your reserved seating, more expensive, but a better experience.
This interview is about you and your amazing career, but as someone who grew up watching Star Wars, I have to ask at least one or two George Lucas questions. I mean, can you tell us something about him that most people would be surprised to know?
Gosh, people know so much about him because he's been out there for so long. I think for me, the thing that I think was just the most amazing discovery very early on is just he has a really incredible sense of humor, and it doesn't come across. And I joke with him because he never smiles in pictures. And so when you see him in a picture, he has this straight face. And so people don't really know he's just really, really funny, very, very clever. And maybe that's just the nature of being a writer. I don't know. But that would be my number one thing that I would say that most people would not know about him. I think the other thing is he literally watches television every day, every single day. It's movies. I come home and he's like, I've been watching a Fred Astaire marathon. I'm like, what? He's a cinemaphile. So television or movies, or when he worked on the Clone Wars, he literally watched The Sopranos every season from beginning to end because he wanted to see how a really strong television show could work. And he literally just sat for weeks and weeks, and all he did was, hour after hour, watch The Sopranos. He'll do things like that as a form of research. And last but not least, is he's learned. So he researches subjects and he goes very, very deep. And it's something like I never would have expected. He's like, books on tape about string theory. And I'm like, what? He's like, you never know how I might use that one day. And that was something I just had not expected. Super, super, super learned.
Well, I was recently reading Bob Iger's book, which I highly recommend. And while reading it, I was really excited to see your name mentioned as you were present during some of the negotiations when Lucasfilm was sold to Disney. I guess it was back in 2011, 12 or so. Can you tell us a little bit kind of behind the scenes what went on?
Well, I would say I wasn't front and center in those negotiations, but I was on the periphery. I was there for the very first breakfast or lunch. No, it was breakfast that we had at Disney World where the subject was broached. And it was funny. We went to the Brown Derby restaurant and it was closed, and it was just the three of us in an entire restaurant, which I thought was fair. I was like, this is strange. But ultimately, Bob Iger brought up the subject of, what are you planning to do with your company? So then it made sense that no one else was around as we were having the conversation. And then along the way, I was obviously there for everything as it was occurring. I remember when George went to sign the papers in Los Angeles. I was in Chicago that day, and I kept saying to him, are you okay? Are you okay? Because I thought, that's very, very, very hard. And, ultimately everything worked out. And Bob was very, very kind and thoughtful every step along the way. I have a lot of respect for him, and not only how he's run that company and the tremendous success that they've had there and the vision that he has, but just how he dealt with George and how he included me in the conversation.
And he kept his word on how the company would be, or the franchise would be treated.
Yeah, he's a pro. He knows what he's doing. And as I said, they've been very fortunate to have him as a leader, and we remain a large shareholder of Disney. And a lot of that is because we know that Bob is such an excellent steward for the shareholders.
I hope you are enjoying the interview with Mellody Hobson. To be sure you never miss another World According to Boyer interview, please follow us on Twitter at BoyerValue.
So I would imagine in many meetings you attend outside of Ariel, you're both the only woman and the only person of color. Does that add a tremendous amount of pressure on you? Do you feel kind of a weight that you always have to be on your game and great?
I've always felt that, but it's not a weight. It just is. So when you're Black and you have a mom like mine, she made it very clear what you're up against. She made it very clear what I was up against at a very young age, and she conditioned me. And so I don't walk in thinking about it. It just is. I have a friend, Olden Lee, who used to be the head of all people and HR at Pepsi. He was on the Starbucks board with me. He's so smart. And Olden, once I was talking to him about these issues, and he said, Mellody, how long have you been Black? How long have you been a woman? It was just such a funny comment, and it really perfectly crystallized for me. It just is. So no, do I walk in carrying a weight or, something on my shoulders or burden? No. I walk in knowing this is just life and me, and situations that I'm in are often very unique, and hoping to do a good job so that the next version of Mellody that comes through is received very, very well.
Well, your TED Talk, which has been viewed 3.8 million times and counting, was certainly received well. The title of the talk was Colorblind or Color Brave. I highly encourage people to watch it in its entirety. But if you had to pick one or two takeaways for people to have, what would they be?
The number one thing is what the title of the talk was about. And so I said colorblind or color brave. I was really speaking to the countless number of times that people have told me over and over again that they're colorblind. And I really decided I wanted to challenge that, because those who often said it to me were the ones who are in the most homogeneous environments. And so I said, what if you actually could, instead of not seeing race, see it? Because if you saw it, you would see that it was missing in your life. And so I'm asking people, instead of being colorblind, to actually embrace the idea of race, embrace the idea of speaking about it, noticing it, talking with others about it, and ultimately, as I called it, being color brave.
So in the speech, you describe an incident involving yourself and Harold Ford. Would you mind retelling it?
So it's a funny story, but it's also sad at the same time. You have to keep a certain sense of humor about these things in life, or else you'd be a little bitter. But Harold had called me. He was running for U.S. Senate, and he was, a very well-known congressman from Tennessee who came from a family of political leaders. And Harold, young Black guy running for U.S. Senate, he called and he said, Mellody, we're early in our careers, and he says, I need help finding and getting some national press. Can you help me at all? I called a friend that was a big deal at one of the biggest media organizations in the country. And I went to her and I said, is there anything you can do to help? And she said, let's do an editorial board lunch for him with a bunch of people. So she says, but you come to New York with him. So we both fly to New York. We're like in our best suits. We look like shiny new pennies, as I describe it in my TED Talk. And we get to the building and we're directed upstairs, and we see the receptionist and we say, we're here for the lunch. The receptionist has us follow her through this long meandering hallway. And Harold and I are not paying much attention because we're talking to each other, because we haven't seen each other, and we're very excited. We're excited for the whole experience. So we finally end up in this room, and we get to this room and it's barren. And she turns to us and she says, where are your uniforms? And we look at each other and we're like, wow. And just as it was happening, my friend runs in, recognizing that we've been detoured, not to the lunch, but to the service area. And she's, just red in the face. And so I joke with her. I say, this is exactly why we need more than one Black person in the U.S. Senate, because at the time we had only had one. And I did it in a joking and funny way, but it was just to suggest, and, the situation underscored how people who see people, particularly people of color, through a certain lens, can't see us in all the ways that are possible. And so, it was a stark moment, but it certainly put a finer point on the reason for the lunch.
So you certainly have an extremely demanding day job being co-CEO of Ariel. And I guess in your spare time, you're on a bunch of for-profit boards. Why did you join a board?
Because it's an area of interest. I feel like I can contribute and learn. And those things are exciting to me. And they've often been companies with leaders who are well known for their excellence. And I want to be around excellence.
You were formerly chairperson of the board of DreamWorks. You were young when you initially joined the board, and other members of the board were David Geffen, Meg Whitman, Jeffrey Katzenberg. How were you able to get appointed to such a prestigious board so early in your career?
Well, it's a more interesting story that doesn't start with DreamWorks. It actually starts with Starbucks. And I received a call one day from Bill Bradley, who I had worked with very, very, very closely when he was running for president. And it didn't work out, obviously. And he called me one day and he said, Mellody, I'm going on the board of Starbucks and I'm taking you with me. And I said, what? And he said, you don't know this, but there have been a number of times you've been on the phone with Howard Schultz, and I've told them how diligent and hardworking and smart you are, and that they really should think about you for the board, and Howard wants to meet you. And so through a series of interviews that took place over a couple of years, I ultimately was selected to join the board. And from there, Howard called me one day and he said, Mellody, I'm going on the board of DreamWorks and I'm taking you with me. And I was like, what? I mean, it was one of those crazy calls. And he said, yeah, DreamWorks is going to IPO and Jeffrey Katzenberg is looking for board members. And I told him you would be great. And so, it's interesting. Part of it was just doing a good job where I was. So with Bill Bradley, when he was running for president, I worked so hard on that presidential campaign. And I was very, very, very focused while working at Ariel. And I would split my day into two parts and work 6-7 hour days at both organizations for a couple of years, 7 days a week. But I worked as if it was a job. It was not a job. And ultimately, that commitment and that devotion was the reason that Bill recommended me at Starbucks. And then when being on the Starbucks board, once I was there, I poured my heart into it. And that led Howard to recommend me. So the big takeaway that I tell people all the time is whatever you're going to do, you want to be a team player and you want to do it very, very well. I had no idea that volunteering for Bill Bradley would lead to being on the board of Starbucks and ultimately vice chair of the board. But it was because I just put my head down and did the work. And it was all about being a good teammate to Bill. And this idea of being a good teammate was something that John Rogers had always stressed to me. John Rogers, who's the person who founded Ariel, he had always stressed to me from the very, very beginning of working at Ariel. He always said, the more you help your teammates, the more you help yourself. And the way that the Bill Bradley relationship and DreamWorks and Starbucks all played out is a testament to that statement.
I mean, that's an amazing story. And basically you had 2 or 3 full-time jobs at once and did a great job for each of them. I mean, you must have extraordinary time management skills. I mean, how do you organize your day?
Well, that's a really great question because I spend a lot of time asking people how they organize themselves because I'm always looking for an edge and a way to be better. I can't quite get to Jeffrey Katzenberg's point where he only needs 4 hours of sleep. He's one of those 10% of people on the planet can live on 4 hours. So he basically jokes he gets an extra day every week, which he does because I've worked with him for a long, long time and I know it to be true. But I can't do that. But what I do spend a lot of time thinking about is how to be efficient. So everything from one of the things I do at Ariel is I have office hours, which I learned in college. I said, why don't we do this at work where there was a stated time every day that you could go and see a professor without making an appointment. There'd be a line outside their door, but they were their office hours. I do that at Ariel. And we set that time up on my calendar for people to know when they can communicate me on small issues that I say it's 15 minutes or less. It's not a meeting, but it's not a phone call. Or it could be a phone call if it's office hours when I'm outside of the office. And so that's one way to organize your time so that you don't have people coming at you all day long because we have a very open door policy at our firm. And so we want to be approachable and accessible to all of our teammates. But the downside of that is, just being interrupted constantly. So by coalescing everyone around the office hours, that helps make me more efficient as one of many examples.
Just switching topics a bit, you serve on a bunch of corporate boards. What do you think the biggest responsibility of a board member is. Also, you were chair when DreamWorks was sold to Comcast. Can you discuss how a sales process like that works?
I think the most important role of a board member is to understand the leadership of the company, succession, and capital allocation. To me, those are top of the list. In terms of the sale of DreamWorks, it was a fascinating process. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It was fun and grueling at the same time. And it started with a phone call that I got one day from Brian Roberts. He started by calling Jeffrey Katzenberg first, and Jeffrey had super voting shares of DreamWorks, and for that reason could not in any way negotiate anything related to the company because he had this special class of shares, and all shareholders in that kind of transaction must be treated equally. So Jeffrey said, I can't talk to you, but you can call our board chair. So it's, 6 a.m. in the morning on a weekday. It's actually a Thursday, I remember. And the funniest thing about it is that when he called, my husband answered the phone. He called the home phone. And I had already come back from my workout, and I was actually literally taking a bath. And my husband made the joke, you want to take a bath with my wife, which was just completely inappropriate, of course. I told you about that sense of humor. And so he hands me the phone, and Brian Roberts, whom I'd met but didn't know really well, said, we have an interest in the company. And so it just sort of started there. And that immediately went to an in-person meeting in Los Angeles that Saturday. And then it just played out over the next couple of weeks of, all day negotiations and back and forth and up in the middle of the night. And during that period, my baby was a baby. And so because I was doing calls throughout the night for about a couple of weeks, this went on for about 2 weeks. And we did a deal fairly quickly because I was doing these calls in the middle of the night. I slept on the sofa in the family room because my guest room was my baby's room. So I slept on the sofa, and the big joke that I had that the people who worked in my house must have thought that I had a bad marriage because every morning they'd come and see this pillow and this blanket. But I sat on the sofa so I didn't wake everyone in the house up because I was doing these calls all night. So it was crazy, and it was very, very invigorating.
How has your board service made you a better investor?
In every way, a better leader, a better investor, I think a better person. And that's because, one, I've had one job since I graduated from college. I've only worked at Ariel. This is 28 years now. So that could be a very insulated experience. That could have been a very insulated experience, but it hasn't been because I've had these other outlets. And by serving on corporate boards, I can tell you in no uncertain terms that it's led to Ariel being run better because I get to learn everything from internal audit to a whole host of things that you can bring back to your organization and make you better. But then also you have experiences in a boardroom that are not the same, but certainly are suggestive in terms of issues that we confront with companies that we own. So you can say, I remember this in one of my own experiences and how it might relate to something we might see with one of the companies in our portfolio. And then also just understanding board dynamics. That's very enlightening when you think about the issues that companies confront on a day-to-day basis. What are they thinking? How are they dealing with this? Who's in charge? All of these things are really informative. So Warren Buffett is the one that said, being involved on boards made him a better investor and a better leader. And I'm 100% in agreement of that point of view. It's been a gift.
Well, Mellody, you've been more than generous with your time. Thank you so much. And it was a delight having you on the show and hearing about your fascinating career.
Thank you so much for having me, and have a happy holiday.
I hope you enjoyed the show. To be sure you never miss another World According to Boyer interview, please follow us on Twitter @BoyerValue. Until next time.